Welcome back to Cityline. With me, I have two individuals who are here to talk about the Port of Tacoma Strategic Plan Open House. So please join me in welcoming a face that we know and love, Mr. John McCarthy. You are Port of Tacoma Commission President. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Amanda, for having me.
It's great to have you on the show. And Eric Johnson, you are a new face to me, but you have been in your position a little over the year, and you are the Executive Director of the Port of Tacoma. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Amanda. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to the interview.
Oh, I am too. So we want to talk to both of you about the Port of Tacoma strategic plan and how it's helping shape the direction for the port. But first, I want to give our viewers some historical context. So let's take a look back on the early days of shipping in Tacoma and exactly how the port got started. So Commissioner McCarthy, I know this was a long time ago. You were not alive then, even though you may feel like it at times. But could you describe to us the Tacoma in the late 1800s to the early 1900s and what the Tacoma working waterfront was like in those early days?
I'd be happy to. When the North Pacific Railroad chose Tacoma as the western terminus of its transcontinental line in 1873, that really gave Tacoma and the Port of Tacoma an economic boost. The railroad at that time had a monopoly on operating the docks and the facilities on Tacoma's waterfront. And the population of Tacoma skyrocketed from about 1,000 people in 1880 to about 36,000 people 10 years later in 1890. Tacoma's rail connection and their naturally deep harbor made international trade natural for our region, and that's still true today. The second photo I think you may have is a photo of the master plan drawing for the Port of Tacoma a little over 100 years ago in 1918. It was 1918 that the Pierce County citizens voted to create the public Port of Tacoma. You could probably call that 1918 schematic drawing really the first strategic plan for the Port of Tacoma. And it shows how the port planned at that time to build docks and wharves on the 240 acres of land that it first started out on. We contrast that to today. The port has about 10 times that amount, about 2,400 acres of land, about half of the land which is located in the tide flats.
Boy, that is a beautiful retrospect. Thank you. So let's fast forward to when you were working on the waterfront as a longshoreman, which I don't know if most people know that. And I think it's a great thing to share because talk about getting your hands dirty. You did it. And then later you were elected to the Port Commissioner for the first time in 1983. So what was the port like back then when you were first elected?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I worked as a casual for 10 years from 1965 to 75, putting my way through school. But from the very start, shipping activity in Tacoma was largely focused at that time on exporting our region's natural resources, such as logs, lumber, coal, and grain. At one point in time, the Port of Tacoma was known as the lumber capital of the world. This aerial photo shows the log exports and how it was keeping the port very busy. And it did so really back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So many of my early jobs as a longshore worker involved handling these logs for export. And it was not easy work. And fortunately, I was nimble at that time on those logs. In the late 1960s, the containerization revolution began, and the port started developing container terminals for a variety of our shipping lines. It was in 1985 that we really made a breakthrough. We were the first on-dock intermodal yard created on the west coast of the United States, and that resulted in us being able to attract two container shipping lines the two largest in the world, Maersk and Cityline. So the photo shows those calling on Sitkam Waterway, and in the background you can see the Port of Tacoma office, which still exists. The port's rail connection, its modern terminals, and the fact that we had land available really helped us attract additional container shipping lines over the years. And that's still true today, where Tacoma and Seattle as a gateway are the fourth largest gateway in the United States.
We certainly are. At one point, we called it the whole Pacific Rim, didn't we? So, Mr. Eric, you have such an amazing background. You spent many years leading the Washington Public Ports Association, and then working with ports all around Washington State. What I want to talk with you about, because of your great background, is let's get to that online open house the port recently launched, and how our citizens can share their ideas and suggestions.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Amanda. I'll start by saying, ports, there's a lot of ports in Washington State. There's more than any other state by a mile. And there are 75, as a matter of fact, which is a huge number. Most people would never guess that. And they do a lot of different things. Obviously, seaports is the first thing everybody thinks about, and that's what the Port of Tacoma's brand in this community is about. But ports can also operate airports. They can operate industrial areas, marinas. They don't have to be on water. Some of them are countywide. The Port of Tacoma is countywide. It's the only countywide government in Pierce County other than the county itself. And ports have the ability to get involved in a lot of different things, tourism promotion, stuff like that. And so there are a lot of ports around the state who have done economic development in a way that's a little different than the standard waterfront jobs. And that's something that I think I can bring to this position, because as you said, for 30 years, I worked in Olympia representing all the ports in the state of Washington. So the Port of Tacoma's strategic plan is about 8 years old. It predates the Seaport Alliance with the Port of Seattle. And so it needs to be refreshed. And so the port is taking a look at what is the plan that we want to have for the citizens of Pierce County to create jobs, for our community. And we started this process in January, and we assumed that we were going to have lots of community workshops and get out and meet lots of neighbors and all that kind of thing. And obviously we've had to completely re-rack that entire thing. So how do you have an outreach process when you've got a pandemic? And the good news is that we are doubling down on our virtual interactions with everybody. We've got what we're calling an online open house, which is sort of self-explanatory. It's welcome to our open house. Tell us what you want to do. It's on the web, and you can reach it at portoftacoma.com. And what we want to do is gather input from the people in Pierce County, the interest groups, the communities, the businesses, the other elected officials. Tell us what you think. There's options on there. There's a survey that we'd like you to take. The survey has already started with the port staff. We started internally and asked ourselves, what do we think the future looks like? And then we're pivoting out to the outside of the community and saying, what do you want to get involved in? Just to tease your audience a little bit, I'll give you a spoiler alert. The kind of things that we've got on there as options are real estate development. I don't mean real estate in terms of like houses. I'm talking about industrial real estate, warehouse distribution centers, manufacturing, things like that. Investments that help the seaport, cargo support options, general economic development, which can mean a lot of different things. Infrastructure, environmental improvements. The port has a big environmental program. We do lots of waterfront cleanup work and contaminated property redevelopment. We can do more of that. We may have some options for open space, public access to the waterfront, that kind of thing. So we'd encourage you to go take that survey. It went live last week. We've had over 1,000 people visit the site so far. Over 100 have already commented. That'll be available and open through December. So our general plan here is that we would like folks to talk to us early if you can, but we're going to be listening all throughout the fall and throughout to the end of the year. So.
Beautifully said, Eric. So one of my last questions, and boy, I'm telling you what, I could talk to you two for hours because there's always so much going on at the port that we need to know. As the executive director, Eric, how will you go about working with the Port Commission and staff to implement this strategic plan once it's formally adopted by the commission?
Well, so the first thing to realize is that the real key, the ownership of the strategic plan is the Port Commission. They are elected. They are your representatives to the Port of Tacoma. They're the ones that guide this place. They're the ones that are accountable for the decisions. And so they're going to have to make some decisions through the strategic planning process. You can't do everything. We all wish we had all the money in the world and we could do everything we want, but we can't. So we have to prioritize. And the commission are the ones that are going to make those decisions. And then once they make those decisions, what we're looking for is alignment between the commission's goals and what the staff actually does. So it becomes the marching orders for me and for the other staff down here at the port. Here's where our priorities are. Here's what we want you to do. Here's the ways we're going to measure whether you're doing it or not. And it's the commission who oversees that work, basically. And they meet once a month. It's a public meeting. Encourage you to tune in if you can. You can go to our website and find it there. It's usually the third Thursday of every month, but check the website because once in a while it changes a little bit. But the commission is the one who's going to make the choices, and then the staff is going to implement it.
So we have until January, it sounds like. Is that correct, Eric?
That's correct.
To get all of our thoughts and all of our wants and the wish list onto the survey. And then after that, truly, from what I understand, that's when the real work begins for you and for the commission.
That's right. Actually, the real work begins right now as we start to gather that information throughout the fall and into November, December. That may leak a little bit into 2020. It's not our goal to go far into 2020, but we just have to acknowledge the reality of where we are right now in terms of being able to interact with everybody. But our goal was to make this a one-year process. And so far, we're on track. We're moving about as quickly as we can, given the tools that we have. But I really want to hear from everybody. And we're having a work session next Thursday, a week from tomorrow. You can tune onto our website and watch the commission, learn from, get a presentation and ask a lot of questions and start teeing up the decisions.
I love that. I want to say thank you to both of you for being here today. This is a very, very busy time as we all pivot and try to get this information out, going virtual. And then, of course, we are at the mercy of the virus. And the virus also, it dictates people's involvement. It dictates business. So I just want to say thank you to both of you and the commission and your team, Eric, for having some real clarity about this foresight and really plowing through and getting that survey out there. And you have to promise me, once the survey is over, you'll come back on and you'll share the results. Deal, both of you?
An absolute bargain.
All right. Thank you both.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much for being here today. Well, that wraps up another great segment of Cityline. It is always my pleasure to zoom from my kitchen into your home. And right now, we are in a really tough, tentative position in our city. So please mask up, wash your hands, and socially distance. And next time, I will see you right back here in my kitchen for Cityline. Take care.
Tacoma, that's my home, yeah, Tacoma, that's my home. Tacoma, that's my home, place I call my own. Tacoma, that's my home, yeah, Tacoma, that's my home. Oh, you're from Seattle, oh, you're from LA, oh, you're from Chicago, but Tacoma's where you'll stay. Oh, you're from Seattle, Chicago, but Tacoma's where you'll stay, yeah. Tacoma, that's my home, from the fires to the loam. Tacoma, that's my home, yeah, Tacoma.